The first book I read with my book club was Moby Dick by Herman Melville, also called The Whale. I have a really nice canvas print here that I got for like, I don't know, 20-25 bucks. It's got like the red wax pages and everything. Very nice. Feels very nice in the hand, very hefty. Anyways, I didn't want to do a plot summary of Moby Dick, just because it's maybe a bit boring, kind of long. There's bits in there that aren't necessarily interesting, and I know if there's a lot of other plot summaries of Moby Dick out there, you can go watch those videos instead. So instead of a plot summary, I wanted to do a little bit of a highlight of certain parts of the book. So throughout the book, more so near the middle, Melville does what's called an elevation, where he uses certain parts of whaling as a metaphor for life or for other things, parts of the human experience. So I just wanted to go through some of the more notable elevations that occur throughout the novel, and then at the end we'll do some rapid fire quotes that I just liked from the book. So the first elevation occurs during chapter 47, where the main character Ishmael and one of the other characters that plays a prominent role, Queequeg, are working together to weave a sword mat, which is just like a mat made out of rope to go on the edge of the boat. And Melville uses it as a metaphor for fate and destiny. So I have some quotes that I'll read to you here. I say so strange a dreaminess did there then reign all over the ship, and all over the sea, only broken by the intermittent dull sound of the sword, that it seemed as if this were the loom of time, and I myself were a shuttle, mechanically weaving and weaving away at the fates. This easy, indifferent sword must be chance, aye, chance, free will, and necessity, nowise compatible, all interweavingly working together. The straight warp of necessity, not to be swerved from its ultimate course, its every alternating vibration, indeed, only tending to that. Free will still free to ply her shuttle between the given threads, and chance, though restrained in its play within the right of lines of necessity, and sideways in its motions directed by free will, thou thus prescribed by both. Chance by turns rules either, and has the last featuring blow at events. So in this metaphor of the sword mat, the sword signifies indifferent chance that can strike very particular way or may bounce to the side. It's uncertain. And then the horizontal lines of the rope are necessity, or the constraints. And then the ball of thread that's guided by Ishmael's hands is the free will. So this metaphor sort of reveals that Melville is a believer in free will, which sort of contrasts against another character in the novel, Ahab, which we'll see later. But he also recognizes that man's will is constrained by certain circumstances. The second elevation comes in chapter 58, and Melville uses the emptiness of a small island in the ocean as a metaphor for rational consciousness as being sort of a delicate gift from God that can easily be lost. The quote goes like this: "Consider all this, and then turn to this green, gentle, and most docile earth. Consider them both, the sea and the land. And do you not find a strange analogy to something in yourself? For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so the soul of man there lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all the horrors of the half-known life. God keep thee. Push not off from that isle. Thou canst never return." That quote kind of reminds me of Freud's distinction between the conscious and unconscious mind, where the conscious kind of takes a small portion, and that part seems rational and manageable, whereas the unconscious is more powerful and vast, and you don't really understand it. And if you depart from that small conscious piece that you understand, you may never find your way back. You might go crazy. The third elevation takes place in chapter 60. Melville is talking about how dangerous whaling is, but the experienced whalers don't really notice. And he uses that as a metaphor to talk about the dangers of life. So the quote goes like this: "All men live enveloped in whale lines. All are born with halters around their necks. But it is only when caught in the swift, sudden turn of death that mortals realize the silent, subtle, ever-present perils of life. And if you be a philosopher, though seated in the whaleboat, you would not at heart feel one whit more of terror than though seated before your evening fire with a poker, and not a harpoon by your side." So Melville is saying that most people live blissfully ignorant of the constant dangers of life, but in one quick turn everything can be taken. The fourth elevation occurs in chapter 68. Melville talks about thick whale blubber and uses it as a metaphor for sort of a stable stoicism throughout the throes of life. So the quote runs like this: "O man, admire and model thyself after the whale. Do thou too remain warm among ice. Do thou too live in this world without being of it. Be cool at the equator, keep thy blood fluid at the pole. Like the great dome of St. Peter's, and like the great whale, retain, O man, in all seasons a temperature of thine own." So the idea is not being affected easily by hardship, or the sort of being true and stable to yourself despite the external circumstances. The next one is chapter 72. Melville is talking about the monkey rope, which is when somebody is working on the whale and cutting it up on the side of the boat. They have to be tied to somebody who's standing on the deck of the boat so they don't fall into the ocean. So, and he uses the monkey rope as a metaphor for all of our dependence that we have on other people. So, the quote runs like this: "I seemed distinctly to perceive that my own individuality was now merged in a joint stock company of two, that my free will had received a mortal wound, and that another man's mistake or misfortune might plunge innocent me into unmerited disaster and death." So the idea is that in some way or another, no man is an island, and we all depend on others. The next one here occurs in chapter 73. So Melville uses the idea that whales have very small eyes and ears, and he uses it as a metaphor that true understanding, greatness, and true wisdom comes not from having greater intelligence or knowing lots of facts, but rather having a deep, nuanced understanding of one or two topics. So the quote runs: "The whale, therefore, must see one distinct picture on his side, and another distinct picture on that side, while all between must be a profound darkness and nothingness to him. Is it not curious that so vast a being as the whale should see the world through so small an eye, and hear the thunder through an ear which is smaller than a hare's? But if his eyes were broad as the lens of Herschel's great telescope, and his ears capacious as the porches of cathedrals, would that make him any longer of sight, or any sharper of hearing? Not at all. Why then do you try to enlarge your mind? Subtilize it." So the word subtilize, if you didn't know what it meant, I didn't either. It just means to make more nuanced or more refined. So basically, Melville is using the most sophisticated way of saying that size doesn't matter. So there you go. Classic literature can teach you things about life, even in the modern time. Yeah, we got two more here. Second last one comes from chapter 81. So Melville is using something called a finback, which is kind of a false sperm whale, as a metaphor for a fool's errand or a wild goose chase. So the quote's kind of short. I just picked one sentence. "Oh, many are the finbacks, and many are the derricks, my friend." So the finback is the false sperm whale. It looks like one, but if you chase it, you'll never catch it. It's too fast. And Derek is the captain of another boat they met at sea, who is like, "Oh, I see a sperm whale," and he chases it, but it's just a finback. So the metaphor is basically saying that many people waste their time on trying to obtain something impossible or otherwise unsatisfying. Our last elevation here comes from chapter 89. Melville uses the idea of common code of conduct for who owns a whale as a metaphor for our own freedom or restriction in life. So at sea, what would happen if a boat harpoons a whale and then the whale runs away and then another boat kills it? Who gets the whale, right? And then Melville introduces the idea of a fast fish or a loose fish. So he says here that a fast fish belongs to the party fast to it, and a loose fish is fair game for anybody who can soonest catch it. And the quote runs like this: "What are the rights of man and the liberties of the world but loose fish? What are all men's minds and opinions but loose fish? What is the principle of religious belief in them but a loose fish? What are the ostentatious smuggling verbalists are the thoughts of thinkers but loose fish? What is the great globe itself but a loose fish? And what are you, reader, but a loose fish and a fast fish too?" So like I said, Melville is asking us to consider the ways in which we are free and may choose as we like, versus the ways in which we are bound to certain ideas or ways of living and we're not really able to change them. So yeah, that's all for the elevations. I just wanted to go through some quotes that I liked in the book, rapid fire style. So let's go. Chapter 37. I love this one. "Dry heat upon my brow, oh, time was, when as the sunrise nobly spurred me, so the sunset soothed. No more. This lovely light, it lights not me. All loveliness is anguish to me, since I can ne'er enjoy. Gifted with the high perception, I lack the low enjoying power. Damned, most subtly and most malignantly, damned in the midst of paradise. Good night, good night. And that's from Captain Ahab, one of the troubled main characters in the book. From the same chapter as well, chapter 37, slightly after the quote I just read, Ahab says, "The path to my fixed purpose is laid with iron rails, whereon my soul is grooved to run. Over unsounded gorges, through the rifled hearts of mountains, under torrents' beds, unerringly I rush. Naught's an obstacle, naught's an angle to the iron way." Yeah, very angsty. Chapter 44. Ah, God, what trances of torments does a man endure who is consumed with one unachieved revengeful desire? He sleeps with clenched hands and wakes with his own body, with his own bloody nails in his palms. Chapter 87. Withhold any amazement at the strangely galled whales before us, for there is no folly of the beasts of the earth which is not infinitely outdone by the madness of men. Chapter 88. Like venerable moss-bearded Daniel Boone, he will have no one near him but nature herself, and her he takes to wife in the wilderness of waters, and the best of wives she is, though she keeps so many moody secrets. Chapter 96. Look not too long in the face of the fire, O man. Never dream with thy hand on the helm. Chapter 96. Again, even in his lowest swoop, the mountain eagle is still higher than other birds upon the plain, even though they soar. Chapter 114. Let faith oust fact, let fancy oust memory. I look deep down and do believe. And the last one here, chapter 125. Lo, ye believers in God's all goodness, and in man all ill. Lo, you. See the omniscient God's oblivious of suffering man, and man, though idiotic, and knowing not what he does, yet full of sweet things of love and gratitude. Yeah, so if you haven't read Moby Dick, I would recommend it. It's a good one. It's a bit of a slog, though, so if you're not very good at follow-through or commitment, maybe hold off, or actually maybe don't. It's a challenge for you, you know? It might be good for you. So yeah, there you go. Have a good one.